You're listening to GOAZCATS.com today, a podcast all about your Arizona Wildcats. Featuring the latest news and analysis from the staff at GOAZCATS.com. Plus, interviews with players, coaches, and expert guests from across the Rivals.com network. Now, straight from the old Pueblo, Tucson, Arizona, here's the host of GOAZCATS.com today, Matt Moreno.
Hello once again, everybody. Welcome back to the GOAZCATS.com today podcast. Today is our game day / pregame edition as Arizona gets ready to take on Colorado at 1:30 p.m. If you're in Tucson, 2:30 if you're in Colorado watching the game. But the Wildcats will have their opportunity to play a road game today, get a chance to, make another statement. They obviously started off Pac-12 play with a win over UCLA, have looked good since that Texas Tech game. But we're still trying to figure out exactly what to make of this Arizona team, and I think today will go a long way toward kind of helping us figure out exactly what this group is about, if we should start to trust them some more. And obviously next week's game against Washington is going to be the true test. But this is another step up for Arizona, another chance to show that they're ready to take this thing to a different level, show that they aren't that team that we saw against Hawaii or NAU, and move forward from that. Obviously the big news of the week is figuring out what's going to happen with Khalil Tate and JJ Taylor. I mentioned on our message boards kind of where I'm standing with things. At this point, if I was a betting man, I'd bet on Khalil Tate getting the start today. But I don't think Arizona's staff is going to be hesitant to use Grant Gunnell if Khalil shows any signs of not being ready to play because of the hamstring or the ankle injury. I don't think Arizona's staff is going to, force him to stay out there if he doesn't look healthy. So I think you can expect potentially both guys to be on the field. But as of this point, I think Khalil's going to get the start, get the chance to show what he can do. JJ Taylor, I think he ends up playing as well. I think he obviously suited up last week, and I think that was a positive sign. Maybe Arizona throws Colorado off and doesn't play him, but I think based on what we saw last week, kind of based on what's been said this week, I think it's okay to assume that JJ Taylor will play. Obviously no guarantees with either guy. Both guys, at least kind of went through early warm-ups. JJ Taylor went through the regular warm-ups last week, so we'll see what happens, and neither ended up playing, as we know. So we'll see what happens with both, but I think at this point it's pretty safe to say that you'll see Khalil Tate out there, at least from my vantage point, and we'll see how it goes. Obviously, he gives them a different dynamic. The last time he was there in Boulder, set a record, kind of started himself off on this path of becoming, a star player in college football. Had an amazing month of October in 2017, and it started with the game against Colorado when he was able to come in and dominate. So we'll see if he ends up giving the Colorado fans at Folsom Field some flashbacks of that 2017 game, assuming he ends up getting the start and gets to play. But he is a key. I think Arizona is at its best when he's out on the field right now, because of his running ability, because of what he's able to do with his feet. It'll be interesting to see how dedicated he is to the run. There have been times when, especially when he's been coming off of injuries or when he's still, a little bit injured but out on the field, where he's been hesitant to run and hasn't wanted to necessarily push it like he has early in this season when he's had some big runs. So we'll see what happens with him. I think JJ Taylor, it's easier to absorb that loss if he doesn't end up playing. Once again, just because you have so many other pieces. You have Gary Brightwell, you have Bam Smith, you have Michael Wiley and Nathan Tilford who can carry the load, and there isn't a huge drop-off from JJ Taylor to the rest of the group. And as much as they are different and have differing styles of running and how they approach the game and what they do well, I think you can work. It still works within the offense. What changes with Khalil Tate to Grant Gunnell is there is such a stark difference between what they do well. Obviously, they passed it 44 times with Grant Gunnell in there last week. That's not something they're going to do very often with Khalil Tate. That was only one shy of his record of 45 pass attempts in a game, which he did last year against Houston. So that's the difference between, the drop-off between someone like JJ Taylor and the rest of his group versus not necessarily drop-off with Grant Gunnell and Khalil Tate, but just the difference in styles. It's so drastic that it changes a lot of things about what Arizona is going to do. And maybe we'll end up seeing Arizona throw a curveball and Obviously Colorado prepared for both quarterbacks. Mel Tucker talked about that this week, but maybe Arizona throws him for a curveball and you end up seeing both guys, regardless of what happens, regardless of if Khalil Tate looks healthy or whatever the case. But we'll see what happens. But like I said, at this point, if I were a betting man, I'd bet Khalil Tate is out there to start the game, and then we'll kind of see where it goes from there. Moving on to the keys to the game, regardless of who's taking the snaps, regardless of who's out there for Arizona, I think there are a few things that are going to be most important for this team, for Arizona to earn a win, starting with the running game. They got away from that a little bit last week with Grant Gunnell. Obviously, you mentioned passing it 44 times. They ran it far less than they normally would. Didn't end up with 100 yards, and ended up with 99 yards, so they almost made it, but it was just a different look with Grant Gunnell out there, and I do think that this strength, and I think we all can see that the strength of this team is running the ball and being able to do that effectively. Obviously, teams know that as well. That's one of the reasons when Arizona hasn't run the ball or hasn't been dedicated to the ground game. You usually hear Kevin Sullivan talk about what the defense is showing and what they're allowing Arizona to do. Last week, UCLA really loaded up the box, played it a little bit differently, took away that running game for the most part, and Arizona was forced to put the ball in the air. I think you can expect the same thing from Colorado and any team that's going to play Arizona until it can show that it can pass the ball effectively. And I think it's going to be important for Arizona to establish the running game early. If it can do that, I think it puts itself in a good position to win the game. That's regardless of J.J. Taylor playing. Obviously, he helps that. He will help the team if he's able to be out on the field and running the ball again. But I think Arizona will be just fine with Gary Brightwell and Bam Smith and the other guys that I mentioned. Obviously, Bam Smith had a great game receiving, being able to catch the ball, make plays that way, and help the team in that part of the field. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all comes together. But I think the ground game and establishing the run early, especially, and getting going from that standpoint is going to be important for Arizona in this game, and will help set them up for a win. Moving on, Arizona, one thing that it hasn't done very well is get pressure on the quarterback, and I think this is one of those games where it's going to be a necessity. As much as other parts of the defense have played well, and how much that hasn't mattered as much, that Arizona hasn't had the big sack totals and hasn't had a ton of tackles for loss from that group up front. I do think this is one of those games where if it can get some pressure, it's going to help in a big way. And obviously that's the next step for this defense. The secondary has shown that it's improved. The linebackers had a very, very good game last week against UCLA. And I think the last piece for Arizona to really improve and show that it's changed with its defensive ability is, getting some more pressure and generating some more pressure. And that's something that was talked a lot about during the week from the defensive players. They talked about getting to Steven Montez and being able to make him uncomfortable. And I think that's a big part of what's going to have to happen Saturday if Arizona wants to get a win. If he's able to kind of just sit in the pocket and pick them apart, the receivers are too good, no matter if they have Laviska Shenault or not. And they have, several other pieces that are very, very good. And it could be Arizona's toughest test from an overall kind of receiver standpoint. Obviously, Texas Tech had some good pieces. Hawaii had some solid pieces. And I think it's going to end up being, their toughest test in a lot of ways. So you have to get to him. You have to be able to at least make him uncomfortable, even if it's not getting to him and sacking him. You have to make him uncomfortable and get him, kind of moving around and not necessarily just letting him sit back there in the pocket. Obviously, Arizona doesn't want him to get out on the run too much. He is, capable of making plays with his feet. He's not like Khalil Tate. He's not as dangerous as some of these other guys, but he can make some plays with his feet, and I think that'll be something to watch as Arizona kind of plays its game on Saturday. Moving on to the third thing, I think getting out to a fast start is going to be huge for Arizona in this game. It's something that they still haven't had a lot of fast starts, and obviously there's been different kind of things that have played into that. Last week it's Grant Gunnell just trying to get his feet wet, trying to get a grasp of starting a game at the college level, but we still haven't seen that quick start, that quick strike from Arizona that I think it needs to make to have that next development of its offense. We'll see what happens this week and what happens Saturday afternoon, but I think especially on the road, especially in this type of game, you want to get out quick, and you want to start early with scoring points and getting out to that fast start. I think that'll be very important for Arizona to kind of establish itself. You don't want to be playing from behind on the road anyway, but especially in this type of game when it could go one way or the other, and it could be having a fast start could be the difference between winning this game and losing this game. Obviously, Arizona has had a lot of strong finishes as of late, shut out UCLA in the fourth quarter, shut out Texas Tech in the fourth quarter. But if it can, eliminate having to do that and can have a cushion going into the fourth quarter where it can be fresh and play well without trying to catch up, I think that'll be a big deal. And so I think getting out to a fast start is going to be huge for Arizona in this game. Next, we're going to go to a question. Axe Advisor once again coming through with a couple questions this week about Grant Gunnell for one and his impact, and also kind of what goes on with the game operations in terms of the coordinators, what they're getting, how they're being utilized on the field, and kind of how the operations work and getting them what they need to know throughout the game so that they can make the proper adjustments. So Axa is going to give you his question, and then I'll come back with some comments.
Hey, Matt. Hope you're well. Hey, a couple of questions. One, our coordinators obviously work from the field level, and I'm wondering about what you have gleaned from conversations with them or Coach Sumlin about having them on the field as opposed to up in the box. And so the second part of that question is, who's relaying information from the box down to them so that they can make the appropriate adjustments? Second question relates to Grant Gunnell. What are you hearing from recruits after the 2 games that he has played? Because certainly the future would look bright if you were a skill player, or certainly an offensive lineman, I think would love to be able to block for him. So I'm wondering if you're hearing any feedback from recruits concerning Grant Gunnell in the future. Thank you. Bye.
So thank you once again, Axa Advisor, for getting his question to me. Don't forget, you can always call in. You guys who are premium subscribers know the number is on the message boards, and you can just call in anytime and drop a question, drop some comments, and kind of give people your thoughts and be used in our podcast. But to answer the question, Theron H. and John Rushing are the 2 guys that I always see kind of coming down to the field. They're up in the box, and they're going to be the main ones kind of giving their information and relaying that information, whatever they're seeing, to the coordinators who are on the field. I know that for Marcel Yates, he's talked about in the past that because he used to be in the box at one point, and he was up, watching things from above, but it obviously there's a disconnect there when you can only talk to the players, over the phone or kind of through some other means as opposed to being on the field. And he said one thing that he likes is being able to kind of see the look in their eyes and look them in the eye when he's talking to them about what they need to do and the adjustments they need to make. And he can get a better feel for his team when he's down on the field. So that's one reason that he's, down there and able to kind of work from the field. But like you mentioned, you need to have some responsible eyes from up top. And I think John Rushing is someone that he really trusts. He's obviously been around him for quite a while. And I think that's kind of how it works with the press box. They're going to give their input, say, hey, this is what we're seeing on, what the offense is doing, what the defense is doing, and what we think needs to be done. Obviously, those coordinators are going to make the final call, but it is, a big process, and those coaches do matter, and it's an important part of what, Arizona does. And, both of those coaches have been around for a while. Obviously, Theron H. has been at Arizona longer than some of the other coaches on staff, just because he was one of the holdovers from the previous coaching staff. And I think there's a lot of trust there with that group, and just understanding that those guys know the game and will be able to help, with the coaches who are down on the field, especially the coordinators. So that's kind of how it works from that standpoint. I do think it's very important, and I haven't necessarily talked to them too much this season about that. Obviously, we don't get to talk to assistant coaches until, spring ball or till training camp, so we haven't talked to any of the assistants since training camp, so it's a little bit different because you're more focused on what's going on during training camp. But I think that's an important part, and going back to the coordinators not being in the box, there's a lot of coordinators who are in the box and would rather see those things for themselves. But I think for Arizona staff, especially with still in the second year on the offensive side of trying to figure those things out, trying to kind of get a better feel for everybody, I think it helps to have Noel Mazzoni down in the field, helps to have Marcel Yates down on the field, and like I mentioned, he likes to be down there. So I think that's kind of how it all works together, and I think they trust those guys that are up in the box. As for the second question, I haven't really talked to too many recruits about Grant Gunnell's performance so far. From what I've heard, it's been pretty positive. Nothing that's going to be earth-shattering or groundbreaking. I think there are players. Dylan Miller, someone I talked to earlier in the season, he mentioned how much he liked what he saw from Grant Gunnell in that NAU game. And I think a lot of players see that there is, a bright future. Is it going to be enough to, suddenly get all these receivers to want to come play for Arizona? I don't think it's to that point yet. I think if we saw more from Grant Gunnell this season, and you see that he really is going to be someone who is this game changer, maybe it has that effect. And obviously, to get their attention, you're going to have to put up some crazy numbers. You're going to have a Khalil Tate in Colorado type of performance, and that'll start to get some attention and get people thinking about things differently. As much as Arizona passed the ball and as much as, as good as Grant Gunnell looked last week, I don't think it was anything that is going to change some minds. Maybe it gets people to look a little bit harder and say, okay, maybe that's somebody I want to play with. But I think the jury is still out on that. For those guys, obviously Brandon Rice, if you guys didn't know, was at the game against UCLA, so that's a positive thing. He's already made his decision. Right now, it feels like it's probably leaning towards, somewhere other than Arizona. But those are the types of players you want to have kind of on board and have those high-end, 4-star guys that are looking at Arizona now. And I think that'll come. Maybe it doesn't come until next year when Grant Gunnell takes over full-time and people are able to watch him game in and game out. But I don't think it's a bad thing for Arizona to be playing him and to have him out there last week and have him succeed. But as far as a drastic change and now I want to go to Arizona, I don't think Arizona's quite there yet. So thanks to Axa for his questions this week. I'm going to move on and get to my game prediction. I think it's just a tough road game. Obviously, if Khalil Tate is able to be out there like I expect him to be, it makes things a little bit different. You can run the ball a little bit more effectively, but you still don't know what you're going to get from him. Obviously, we've seen him come off of injuries before, and it takes him a little while to get going, a little while to get confident and comfortable running the ball. I don't know that it happens that quickly for Arizona this week, and it's a tough game. And I think when you have like that 3-4 kind of margin, you're basically saying, hey, it's a toss-up, and we're giving the edge to Colorado. If you're Vegas and you kind of come up with that point spread, you're basically giving Colorado the edge for being at home. I think that ends up playing out. And for right now, I have it as Arizona losing this game 31-28, but obviously a 3-point swing can go either way. I mean, I could see Arizona winning this game as well. I think it's a pretty evenly matched game. I think both teams obviously have had their ups and downs this season. Colorado's already played in a couple overtime games. So there's a lot of things to kind of figure out, especially with injuries. Laviska Shenault, Mustafa Johnson, Chris Miller, a few guys that are key players for Colorado that are injured, that are going to be game time decisions that could change things one way or the other. Obviously, Arizona has Khalil Tate, J.J. Taylor that it's hoping to get back Saturday afternoon. So there's a lot of kind of X factors and things that are going to play into it in the end. But to me, I think Arizona's defense gives up a little bit more than what it's been giving up, and maybe that's the part of the team that eventually surprises me Saturday if Arizona's able to pull out the win. But I think Arizona's defense takes a little bit of a step back this week and gives up more points than it's been giving up. And so I have it as Arizona losing this one 31-28. But like I said, that 3-point margin, you never know. You could go either way. But thank you guys for listening. Make sure to pay attention to everything on the message boards. I'll bring you any kind of news or notes before the game. And obviously you can join the game thread and join the conversation throughout the game as Arizona takes on Colorado at 1:30 p.m. in Boulder. Thank you all for listening once again, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of GOAZCATS.com today. GOAZCATS.com is the totally unofficial U of A fan site and your source for University of Arizona team coverage and recruiting news.